Welcome to Innovation in Government. I'm your host, Jason Miller. My guest today is Eva Skidmore, the Vice President of Public Sector for Salesforce. Eva, welcome to the program.
Thank you so much for having me.
Before we get started, let me set some context for our discussion. Let's turn back the Wayback Machine. Let's go all the way back to 1993. President Bill Clinton was just elected. Movies like Groundhog Day, The Fugitive topped the box office. And Congress began its push to encourage, to prod, we'll say to push agencies to think harder about how they serve citizens. Lawmakers 26 years ago passed the Government Performance and Results Act, commonly known as GPRA. Just as a reminder, GPRA required agencies to engage in performance management tasks such as setting goals, measuring results, reporting their progress. In order to comply with GPRA, agencies were supposed to produce strategic plans, performance plans, conduct gap analysis of projects. All right, let's fast forward two decades later. The Government Accountability Office's website is filled with reports about how agencies are, quote unquote, meeting citizens' expectations. From the IRS's phone service to the Social Security Administration's answering questions about retirement and disability, to federal student aid, to the National Park Service, and almost every other agency about how they're delivering or trying to deliver high quality services in an expedient manner. And the results, as we know, are mixed. The most recent data from the Trump administration for its customer service cross-agency goal highlights 14 agencies and one interagency initiative that the White House identified as high-impact service providers. Under Circular A11, OMB required these agencies to complete a self-assessment to rate their program maturity and identify initial areas of development to inform their required action plan. Then agencies met with OMB to evaluate their customer experience self-assessments and draft action plans to identify common pain points, capacity gaps, and opportunities. Now these 14 agencies are submitting metrics to a dashboard measuring customer satisfaction as part of an overall effort to ensure departments are adopting best practices. And a key piece to this, of course, is technology. At the same time, agencies are following an IT modernization strategy that focuses on user-centered design and meeting customer expectations. So how do agencies bring us all together? Customer services, IT modernization? Well, that's where my guest comes in. Once again, Eva Skidmore is the Vice President of Public Sector for Salesforce. So let's jump right in. There's a lot of focus on improving customer service. How are agencies doing, and what do they need to do to continue to improve the trust of their services?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, while IT modernization has been a primary concern for federal government agencies in recent years, there's still a lot of disconnect between adopting and deploying innovative technology. And how this impacts customer engagement and the citizen experience is a big deal. So in some ways, adopting new technology was the easy part. Translating that new technology into a better program outcome is a customer service question that has called for a real shift in mindset within trailblazers for these government agencies. So government leaders in the agencies you referenced must be those change agents to really help the individuals and teams to make that change. They have to have the passion to push government forward, and those are the real trailblazers. We're seeing this happen. We're really seeing this happen. The 21st Century Integrated Digital Experience Act, the IDEA Act, is helping push those agencies in the right direction, and that change isn't easy. When organizations and customers are choosing something like a cloud platform that helps dissolve silos, give them access to data, improve process and interaction, that's really how we see agencies go through those changes. Once teams realize that they do place the customer at the center of everything they do, that's how they reimagine public service.
You bring up, I just want to jump in because you bring up several interesting points, and one of them I'll go back to is the IDEA Act, right? This is something that got a lot of interest. Are you starting to see agency customers talk about the IDEA Act as a way to address those customer service gaps and needs?
Absolutely. When I look at the U.S. Department of Agriculture and their farmers.gov application, that is a way for providers to walk into a virtual front door to the Department of Agriculture and get access to the grants or the loans or the other services they need right from the convenience of their mobile phone.
And that is a great example because it's something the administration has made a priority. They've given money to through the Technology Modernization Fund. So here you have that intersection of technology, innovation, and customer experience, customer needs. And I think that is really the key that's going on here is how can you continue to improve those trusts? I mean, what from a Salesforce perspective, from an industry perspective, are you starting to see those best practices kind of absorbed by agencies, whether you see it from the private sector, public sector, they're starting to kind of creep into the government?
I think so. I mean, one of the big challenges is identifying the best place to start and finding a program or a project where you can put into place those people, process, and technology protocols to make it easier for employees to provide great service to the customers.
You talk about the people, the protocols, the processes, and a lot of agencies are trying to move in that direction, and they're trying to bring in what the private sector is doing. And one key piece to this is something commonly known as open platforms. Not quite open source, but open platforms, which is, if you will, non-proprietary. Even I'll bring in the term plug and play, if you remember that from maybe from 10 or 15 years ago. It's something that Salesforce obviously is a big proponent of, the idea of open platforms. Talk a little bit about what that means for this idea of customer service and IT modernization.
Great, awesome, thank you. The Salesforce CRM platform can be seen as an open platform because we integrate seamlessly with so many other systems. And in the context of IT modernization, there's not necessarily a need to replace or rehost or refactor. One can plug in to existing or legacy systems. So it's whether they're cloud or complex legacy systems, many government programs and systems have to come together to deliver end-to-end services. So for example, do you want me to give you an example?
Yeah, that'd be great, because I was going to say, it sounds like you're describing that API issue, right?
Exactly.
So give me that example.
So if we think about hire to retire in the Department of Defense, many personnel and programs and systems come together. So they're coming together to recruit, onboard, train talent, as well as identify and address any gaps in staffing. So through an API-led connectivity, Salesforce ties the right data and systems together while improving that customer engagement. So, when we think about what makes the platform open, it really is the way that the solutions and the components are completely reusable across agency, across commercial, across private sector. And this means agencies spend less time building solutions and managing infrastructure and code, which are commonly two of the leading culprits that end up making systems expensive and hard to maintain.
Let's pull the string on that just a little bit more. Neither of us are techies, but let's get the idea of, if I have a existing platform or existing system, and to get it off the legacy and modernize it, I just don't have the money right now, but I could potentially, through an API, access that data on this kind of on a Salesforce platform that would allow me to do what? Is it just that's the connection that you're making, that you don't necessarily, modernization is important, but you can modernize and still access that data. It's not one or the other.
Exactly. One of the ways that I like to think about it is I'm modernizing the customer experience or the platform for engagement for providing the services to the constituents. So you may not need to change the underlying layer. You may not need to change the workflows and process, but what you are changing is how your citizens or employees or partners are accessing the technology and information. So it's essentially a user experience level layer on top of systems that can then free up the time and expertise to do more things.
And I think that tags back around to meeting citizens' expectations. Everyone loves to make the comment about, oh, we have to be more like, and you can fill in the blank, Netflix, Amazon, you fill in the blank, right? But what this is allowing agencies to do, it seems like, is address that where the user comes and meets the agency, while also dealing with that back-end infrastructure. But it's not like, well, we have to do one and then the other. Almost they can happen in parallel, and the agencies can, and the users, the citizens, can experience the better improvement without having to wait so long.
Right.
One of the things about open platforms and the customer experience is there are obviously the gaps in the technology side, but there's also gaps in the people side. How are you guys seeing those gaps being filled? Whether, again, you mentioned a little technology, but then you have the people, understanding the user experience. What does that actually mean?
That's a really complicated question for a lot of government agencies.
And for a lot of private sector.
And private sector as well. Workforce development, having the right people with the right skills and the right capabilities is super important. At Salesforce, we have a couple of ways that we make the technology more accessible to the government workforce and help them increase their ability to work in different platforms and systems. It's called Trailhead, where we host events like the DC World Tour. This year it's on May 14th at the Convention Center. But we really feel strongly that the technology should be an easy thing to use, so that employees can do their job more effectively and more efficiently. They can manage cases They can interact with the system, and the technology isn't getting in the way of them providing the service.
And associated with that is not just the people, but the culture of the organization. And your example of the USDA, I think, is a really good one, because that's coming straight from the top, where Sonny Perdue, the secretary, is saying, I want to change the way farmers or producers or our customers interact with us. That's the other issue I think that you bring up, is if you don't have to worry so much about the technology, then that can also help change the culture of the organization. How much of that talent and culture piece do you have as you have conversations with agency customers, or they just want to talk about technology and they haven't quite gotten their head around, hey, it's more about the talent and culture side?
Yeah. We are spending a lot of time talking about that enterprise type of transformation. One example is with Amtrak, and they had a significant number of applications across their business that were developed, and they did an application rationalization process where they really evaluated what were the key processes and applications that they needed to have in order to serve their business and make their organization more effective. So they reduced the number of applications they had, but increased the ability for the people, on the tracks turning the trains to access the information they need to do their jobs.
And I think that's the key, because one of the way you change culture, one of the way you improve the services, is to ensure that the people who are doing the work, really, where if you talk about the IRS or Social Security Administration, people in the field offices that are interacting with citizens every day, they can say, oh, well, let me bring that up for you. Oh, okay, I see you're doing X, you're doing Y. And versus, oh, let me get back to you in a week or so. And I think that's where it goes back to the technology and open platform side, because the APIs can pull data from any database. You have that access. Is that the step that agencies need to take to kind of improve their citizen services and customer experiences, is by moving to the open platform concept, is understanding that the culture piece, the people piece, that if you can get them the information, then they can do better work?
Yeah, I think there's a currently there ends up being a siloed focus of, there's the IT organization, there are the program managers and business leads, and then there are the customer-facing program leaders. And if all three of those organizations come together, that's when it becomes a really efficient cross-functional system. So when we think about, government decision-making ends up being federated. So if you offer that customer-centric approach to modernization and help teams across agencies figure out what's best for them, it helps that program, business, and IT team, use the cloud and use this open platform to realign and automate and scale. And then, of course, the executive alignment is critical, as you mentioned.
You bring up a really interesting point about combining the customer experience, the customer service with the IT. And the more CIOs I talk to across government, the more I hear them say, well, we have a reorganization underway, or we just completed, we don't want to call it a reorganization, a revamp, or whatever they want to call it, to be more customer focused. Is that a sign, do you think, that organization is going down the right path? When you talk to a CIO, when you talk to an agency, that they have kind of implemented that customer service side into their technology side, like they brought them together? Is that a good sign?
That is a very good sign.
That was a little bit of a softball, maybe, huh?
That is a very good sign. It is a journey. We experience conversations with customers all the time where they're so focused on the investment they've made in their legacy systems, and the fact that those legacy systems are so critical to keeping the lights on the government service. But yet they have their eye toward the future. They're looking toward the government of the future, what services and how they want to provide. And so bridging that gap and understanding where to start. How do you choose the right program or the right project to start, and how do you choose the right platform and company and partner to help you get there? That's one part of it. And I think a lot of the progressive agencies and the trailblazers within the government that we're working with have been able to pick a place to start, see the impact, and iterate on that. And that's also the beautiful thing about having a platform like Salesforce at your fingertips, is then your IT department can be the center of excellence. They have the authority to operate, the securities and compliance controls are in place, and you can add program after program after program onto your core foundation so that you can expand the services across the organization.
And actually, that's a great segue to take a quick break, because when we come back, we can talk about that, the technology side of it. Even though we know it's all about culture and people, there's still a big technology piece. You're listening to the discussion Innovation in Government, sponsored by Carasoft on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.